Good afternoon, Beau. Go ahead and press that if you're going to talk. Beau, do you have any cell phone with you? Could you kindly turn it off, please? Thank you. Would you kindly raise your right hand? I'm going to put you under oath. And just answer. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Beau, would you please just identify yourself, your full name, your position, and the company you represent?
My name is Beau Tomokane. I'm the acting customer service manager for Pacific Airport Services.
Thank you. Beau, would you just share with the members what is it you do at the airport as a acting manager for Pacific Airport Services?
I'm the company liaison between my company and Delta Airlines management, and I'm also a working manager.
So do you work for Delta or do you work for Pacific Airport Services?
I'm employed by Pacific Airport Services, and we handle all ground operations for Delta Airlines.
As far as your specific responsibilities on a day-to-day basis, what is it you do?
Every day it depends because I'm very cross-utilized. So I can go from supervisor positions. I can also assist customers with tickets, as well as assisting high-value customers.
Thank you. In the early morning hours of August 4th, when the Buckingham incident took place, what were you doing that morning? What was your role? You said you do different things. What were you doing that morning between the hours of 3 o'clock in the morning when your counter opened and 6 o'clock in the morning?
At that time, on that day, I was the customer service supervisor for the counter.
Were you also assisting in checking in customers that morning?
Yes.
So, was it yourself and Mr. Jones who was taking care of customer check-ins that morning?
Mr. Jones and myself assisted with checking in Mr. and Mrs. Buckingham.
Thank you. Now, can you explain to us what you mean by assisted Mr. and Mrs. Buckingham?
Issue boarding documents.
And what took place with the checking in of Mr. and Mrs. Buckingham?
I saw a SUV pull up and some law enforcement officials approached the counter. I did not recognize this one official, but he was recognized by my colleague, Mr. Jones, who endorsed passports.
As a supervisor, you're probably aware, you should be aware of the requirements for checking in customers, correct?
That's correct.
We understand that this case was sort of different outside of the normal practice because the customers or the passengers themselves didn't check themselves in. You're aware of that?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Do you know why an exception would be made?
No.
As a supervisor, did the agent kind of turn to you and ask you if we know that the agent, Mr. Jones, was fairly new and maybe wasn't sure of what to do, did he turn to you and ask you for your advice?
My advice for
allowing somebody else to check in the passengers?
no, he didn't.
Okay. Members? Rep De La Cruz?
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Tomokane.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for joining us this afternoon. You stated earlier that you saw Mr. and Mrs. Buckingham in an SUV pull up to the departure area road.
No, I did not. I said I saw only the vehicle. I didn't see the passenger.
Okay. And you only knew that it was Mr. and Mrs. Buckingham that was being checked in when this police officer came to the check-in counter. Is that correct?
I was aware that we were checking in Mr. and Mrs. Buckingham because of the passports that were endorsed.
By this individual that came with the passports of Mr. and Mrs. Buckingham.
Yes.
The question may have been raised earlier by the chair, but again, is it normal practice for an airline to check in individual or individuals in this case without being present at the counter?
Normal practice to check in without being present? Is that the question?
Yes, aside from going to the kiosk or checking in online, and I believe that those are the only other two options that one can make to check themselves in, aside from being present personally on the counter.
Customers presenting passports and baggage must check in at the counter.
Okay, so in this case, the customer was not the individuals based on the passports, correct?
Correct.
This was a police officer. Did you know that it was a police officer checking in, Mr. and Mrs. Buckingham?
At the moment, no.
At that moment, you didn't know he was a police officer. So you weren't aware of Captain Nakaifis at that time?
I never met him before that one.
Okay. After, was there anyone else present besides Captain Nakaifis at the counter during the checking in of Mr. and Mrs. Buckingham's baggage?
Yes.
And who were these individuals?
The only individual I could recall is Chief Kosa.
And Chief Kosam is the chief of the ports police at the airport, I assume.
Yes.
And the other individual, have you seen him prior to August 4th anywhere in the newspaper, TV?
I don't recall.
Okay. I'll yield for now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rep. Any other members? If not, we've heard pretty much the same testimony from Mr. Jones. It seems to be consistent. Are there any objections to the chair dismissing the witness and moving on to our last witness?
Chair, just one more, real quickly. I would like to ask Mr. Tomokane. The employee that was there for Delta Airlines, I presume, was her name Selena Regis?
Yes, she is.
Was she like the overall supervisor or manager for the operations that night?
Yes, she is.
Did she witness the checking in of Mr. and Mrs. Buckingham by the police officer?
No, she didn't.
She didn't know.
She didn't.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tomokane.
Again, if there are no objections, I am going to dismiss our witness. Thank you, members. Mr. Tomokane, you will be dismissed. Please provide your contact number to our Sergeant at Arms. In the event that the committee wishes to ask you to return and answer further questions, we will give you reasonable notice. Do you understand?
I understand.
With that, again, we want to thank you for your patience first, for your attendance second, and for your cooperation. You have a nice day, sir.